Hi, I'm Pete Tong. I first got involved in radio because when I started DJing wasn't considered to be the career it is today. So although I did start as a club DJ, really the only way of kind of enhancing my reputation and kind of getting the message out there was to actually get on the radio. The kind of my mentors, my heroes as I was starting out were radio DJs. They were specialising in kind of dance music of the day, but they were kind of radio personalities. So I always had an interest, a fascination with radio. I used to remember, I used to be at a boarding school and like sitting there listening under the covers to DJs and kind of identifying which ones I liked and kind of getting into the kind of banter. So it was in the early days. It was kind of pirate radio really in London. Which were illegal radio stations where we used to kind of set up transmitters in like high-rise buildings and then broadcast until the police, we used to have lookouts. And then when the police came, we used to pack up all the equipment and scarper out of the building. And then from that, I started to I got a big break when I was really young because I was writing for a music magazine and I got invited to come and speak on Radio 1. So I became a regular contributor to an evening show where I would go on every fortnight and bring what I considered were three of the hottest records. So that was really, really exciting. And I got to see Radio 1, which was like this, monstrous national radio station. It was even bigger then than it is today in the sense that there was a lot less competition for people's attention. And I got to see the inner workings of Radio 1, and I identified pretty quickly that I didn't want to be a breakfast show kind of DJ because I discovered that they didn't pick their own records. I understood what a specialist DJ did, and they were the ones that came in and picked their own music. So I was too young to get a show on Radio 1 at that time. They kind of encouraged me to go out and get some experience. So I went into kind of legal regional radio. I got on a big station in the county of Kent, which is where I was from, just outside of London. Then eventually I broke through in London and got on to BBC Radio London, which was the local station for London, and then on Capital Radio, which was really my big break in 1987, which happened to coincide with the arrival of the rave scene, acid house, and the start of kind of house music and the whole story as we know it today. So it was perfect timing really. And then eventually I got the slot on Radio 1 back in 91, and I've been there ever since. So I mean, in various different shapes and forms over the last 20 years I've kind of interacted, been on American radio in different forms, syndication. At one stage we were going through the Sirius and XM platform, both individually as my show and as Radio 1. But a few years ago, I met the people at Clear Channel. One of the senior management was coming to Ibiza, saw what was going on there, and I got recommended to him as someone that they should get involved in. And I was able to come in, I was invited in, and we kind of rebranded their electronic offering on the iHeart platform and relaunched it as Evolution. So from day one on the streaming platform, I've been there 5 days a week and had a fairly heavy hand in kind of shaping the programming of the rest of the station. Not long after that, they launched on 2 terrestrial stations in Boston and Miami. The Miami one's still going, which is Evolution here in Miami. And then we kind of changed strategy. We kind of collectively decided that the best way of really getting the message out there was to actually get an hour on the biggest top 40 stations in the country. So we did that for a few months, and that went so well that we were able to extend it to a 2-hour slot. So we're now 2 hours a week before midnight at the weekends, kind of pretty much prime time, in cahoots with Beatport. So it's the Evolution Beatport show, which is the kind of weekly national offering. And then that went so well that they actually now loop that, and they've given it its own channel on the iHeart app as well. So wherever you are in the country, you can just hit on Evolution Pete Tong, and you'll hear that show on demand, kind of seven days a week, 24 hours a day. So yeah, it's been, you can't, it's never kind of revolution in radio. It's always about, you know, evolution. And that's the name of the station. So I think, you know, after 2 years now, we're starting to kind of get somewhere, and people are starting to notice. So yeah, I mean, I think I've always tried to. I mean, it's important to create a platform that has enough gravitas and a big enough audience that you can actually, I call it, kind of move the needle. So, you know, it's easy to be elitist on radio, but then it's easy to be very niche and not have that bigger listenership. So it's always a balancing act, kind of a tightrope walk of kind of cuming enough of an audience to actually mean that when you do play something new and you do take a risk, that you have, you know, you've got an audience to actually affect, you know, and get a reaction from. So that's kind of my game since I started on the radio. It's always that kind of 1 foot in the daytime, 1 foot in the nighttime. It's always about inviting everybody in and then actually trying to turn them on to what the next best thing is. And that's kind of that's always been my approach. It's been a formula that's worked a long time in the BBC with Radio 1. I'm very lucky there because it's not a commercial station. It's a public service station, but it's a public service that wants to be popular. It wants to have a big audience. It wants to be the dominant force in youth culture. So, you know, 16 to 24-year-olds, Radio 1 represents a very important thing for the BBC in general. It's like it's their access point to the next generation. It's slightly different, obviously, being with Clear Channel as a commercial setup. But I think with the Evolution platform and with the streaming service on the app, it's been a good tool. It's a good way of getting the message out there. So it's kind of the same formula, it's slightly different. But you kind of mix a bit of a different cake for the US audience compared to the UK. But ultimately, I'm trying to do the same thing. There's no point in me coming on and just, you know, playing wall-to-wall kind of EDM, because that's kind of well catered for and very available. A lot of it on Top 40 Daytime itself, and then on other channels. So I'm trying to carve a kind of different path. Yeah, kind of instinct, my taste. Most of the time, and a lot of science in the sense of, I mean, one of the great, I always had this kind of network of people around me, and I kind of sit in a pool of, you know, amazing professionals, you know, just the world of DJing. So I have my, I'll always, it's like a spider's web basically, where the information kind of trickles down, and as much as, you know, 50% of the time, it'll be because everything gets sent to me first, or people want to premiere music for the first time. But the other 50% of the time, it's just important to watch actually what's getting reacted to, because there's so much music and so many, you know, there's just so much stuff out there. It's impossible to be on top of it. You know, even if you listen to music 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, you'd still miss stuff. So it's important to be plugged into kind of like the Matrix, I call it. In terms of the information flow of actually watching, you know, what's happening on social media and stuff like that. And that's one of the greatest gifts that's happened, you know, in the age of the internet, is obviously through SoundCloud in particular and YouTube, that you've got good statistical information coming through as well. So it's like it's a combination of everything. But so it's important to, I want to be turning people on to new music that no one's ever heard before, and I want to be fanning the flames of things that are naturally happening out on the edges, and kind of start to bring them into the mainstream. You know, I always think I operate, if you think of the kind of surface of the ocean, and I always operate kind of 10 feet below and 10 feet above. That's kind of my, you know, that's kind of my thing. It's not going, I'm not delving, you know, 1,000 leagues under the ocean and bringing up like really, really obscure stuff. I could do, but that's kind of not ready for the audience. It's that stuff that's just bubbling under the surface that you can actually have a big effect on. I mean, initially the thought process behind it was quite simple. Actually, it was about repositioning Ibiza in a better light to the world at large. Ibiza has an amazing reputation. Everyone knows Ibiza, but most people back in 2008 thought it was just this hedonistic party island, which in some ways it is, but it's also, you know, we just thought that when you consider that Miami has had the Winter Music Conference, New York historically had the New Music Seminar in the 80s, the Billboard Convention, Amsterdam Dance Event in October. That, those are great events, and they represent cities and places and countries that had also made a massive contribution to the scene. But we felt that no place on the planet really back then was having as much influence on the scene as Ibiza, and yet it didn't have a voice. It didn't really have a that kind of respectable side. I don't think people really acknowledged it, and that was the mission day one, was to actually create an event where Ibiza could start to get recognised for some of the stuff that it did. David Guetta wouldn't exist without Ibiza. Fuck Me I'm Famous wouldn't exist without Ibiza. Swedish House Mafia came together in Ibiza. Martin Garrix might be flying here, but he still considers Ibiza to be the place where we'll take his reputation to the next level, hence him doing a residency there this summer. So, we wouldn't really have an underground as we know it without Ibiza. The phenomena of kind of Marco Carola and things like that, although he's Italian, his reputation was really made in Ibiza. So we thought Ibiza was very important. We wanted to kind of get the word out there. So that was the initial thing. The government, the Conseil of Ibiza, also were very supportive of this this kind of thought process, and they also wanted to extend the season. Actually, they wanted to actually get people to come before the clubs open. So that's why we've always been in that week before the official openings. So, and then just to finish off we also wanted it to be. We didn't want it to be a DJ convention with everyone turning up with record bags. We wanted it to be we were inspired more by kind of TED Talks and by what I remember of the great stuff that I learned through the New Music Seminar and an event in Manchester called In the City, which Tony Wilson used to run. So it was always more about, we called it a summit because we wanted it to be where the kind of the good and the great of our world came together to kind of discuss the issues of the day and see what we could do to kind of to move the business forward at large. So.
And where's that project now?
Well, we're in I think this is our 7th or 8th year in Ibiza, which happens at the end of May. It went so well there that we constantly were getting asked to do something in the US. And eventually, 3 years ago, we actually did a pop-up event at Coachella at the Ace Hotel between the two Coachella weeks, and that was really well received, and that took us into Hollywood, where we partnered up with a W. So we launched at IMS Engage in LA 2 years ago. So that's happening again in April. So that'll be technically our 4th year in America. Engage is a slightly different format. It goes even more kind of TED Talk. It's 6 to 8 inspiring conversations of about 60 minutes in length, and then opened out to questions in the audience. And what we try and do is, again, pull in some heavy hitters from the world of electronic music, both artists and people behind the scenes, and put them together with inspiring characters from like-minded businesses, that we think have some kind of synergy with. So Kevin Synstrom came a few years ago from Instagram. I think sitting with, I think it was Diplo or Skrillex, but those kind of combinations. So got an interesting one this year with Seth Troxler sitting with Chuck D, from Public Enemy. So it should be entertaining. Last year we had David Lynch with Moby. We had Hans Zimmer sitting with Junkie XL, who's became his kind of protege. So that's LA's. We're in Hollywood between Coachella. People have very busy lives, so we bring a little bit more of an element of entertainment into it as well. And then the third event launched in December last year, which was the Asia Pacific one with IMS in Singapore. So and that was really important because I feel that that part of the world, we really can be the first. I think with the IMS in Europe, we kind of complement what ADE do at the other end of the season. And then obviously Miami's been going for 20 odd years. And our LA events are a different flavour to what goes on here. But I think in the Far East, we're the first. We can almost make it up. we can almost be a combination of all those things, you know. You know, historically, over the last 10, 15 years, I mean, there's always been a demand in Asia. All markets are developing at, you know, slightly different rate, and I would even include Australia in that, of course. But with, you know, and India's been very active for 5 years and pretty active for 10 years. Japan, very active for a long period of time. And then all those markets like Thailand, Singapore, Indonesia have all come on stream in the last 10 years. What's tended to happen in the last 5 years with the explosion of the scene in the US is it's actually drained the market over there of the big names. So it's put a little bit of a stall on the growth because you can't go into those markets necessarily and like launch Tomorrowlands, you know, because you can't get, you know, whether it be Skrillex or Calvin Harris or David Guetta or whoever you need to kind of make it work. So it's kind of evolved in a slightly different way. What's you know, everybody, what's tended to happen in the last few years, like a lot of the biggest artists are in Ibiza in the summer, and then the minute the summer ends, they rush back to America. So it's that's part of the reason we want to be there, to kind of actually move the focus back over there. I think there's masses of opportunities over there, because while the festival bills are very crowded at the top end with all the big names, there's actually opportunities in the Far East for those people that are to kind of build their reputations in a different way. So it's a bit more of a land grab over there. If you spend time in the market, you actually really work it, you can actually, they're very loyal and very supportive, and I think there's big business over there. And the most important bit at the end, I would say, is obviously now China coming on board and starting to open up. I played in, you know, it's not new to go and play in China, but nobody's really had a concerted effort at actually really breaking the market. You know, people have gone in there. You know, Paul Oakenfold played the Great Wall of China over 10 years ago. Yeah. But not many people go back in there with a touring strategy in the same way they do here. So sure. I think it's masses of opportunity. I mean, we sold more badges year one in that event than it was equivalent of being in America after 3 years or Ibiza after 3 or 4 years. So the interest was huge. So we kind of undersold it. We could have done 2 days for it. We did 1 day. We could have easily done 2 or 3. So we'll be back there in December this year. Yeah.